In 1980, Nickelodeon introduced 3 anthology-type package shows that aired imported pre-existing programming. It was primarily a move to fill out the station's hours and make it less dependent on long stretches of pinwheel. We've already covered the first one, Children's Classics, an attempt at refocusing 1970s BBC costume drama serials from an adult audience to a child audience. The second one of these shows also consisted of British imports, but at the very least, these imports were made with children in mind and fit the goals and attitudes of Nickelodeon 1980 a lot better. And it was called First Row Features, which I keep accidentally typing out as Front Row Features because that rolls off the tongue better. The only thing Nickelodeon actually created for the show was this opening, with little nondescript claymation characters wandering into a movie theater to watch the day's features. Who exactly created this opening I haven't been able to pin down, but the channel did have some animators on staff through Pinwheel, so it was probably done through them. What really mattered was what the show aired. This print ad would lead you to believe it has something to do with Charlie Chaplin, but that's not the case at all. Instead, Nickelodeon licensed the library of the Children's Film Foundation, or CFF. And this, in my opinion, was a really good move. To talk about the CFF, we need to talk about British cinema. No, put down that copy of The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. British cinema isn't all Powell and Pressburger, believe it or not. In Britain, the first half of the 20th century saw the rise of the Children's Saturday Matinees, a designated time where kids could come in, watch films specifically made for them, and then there'd probably be extra activities like group sing-alongs, competitions, educational speakers, that sort of thing. The idea had been developed since at least 1900, but it really hit its stride in 1943 thanks to a man named Lord J. Arthur Rank. Rank was born into the flour industry. His father's company, Joseph Rank Limited, was Britain's largest flour milling company for a time. While there would always be a place for Rank there because, nepotism, he was notably not very good at it. Now, Rank was a devout Methodist, and sometime in the late 1920s, early 1930s, not exactly sure when, he was a Sunday school teacher, and part of his classes included the showing of religious films to children. This practice caught on with other churches, and Rank suddenly found himself becoming a film distributor. And in 1933, Rank founded the Religious Film Society. Film distribution later expanded into film production. At the same time, Methodist newspapers were bemoaning the harm British and American cinema was having on family life. The paper The Evening News responded by basically saying, well, if you don't like it, make your own movies. There was a demand for wholesome family cinema. Not necessarily religious cinema, but films that promoted good values and good behavior. Rank's films were being exclusively distributed to churches. If he could just redirect his resources to distribute to mainstream theaters, he could strike gold. First, he would need financing, and the best way to get financing in Britain in the 1930s was to woo a rich widow. I'm not making this up. Enter Lady Annie Henrietta Yule, an Arabian horse breeder and big game hunter who was monstrously bored and was looking for a new hobby. Rank came up to her and went, "Hey, would you like to help me make movies?" And Lady Yule was like, "Alright, why not?" Together they formed the British National Films Company in 1934. By all accounts, Lady Yule didn't take the business all that seriously. She was just the money lady. In 1935, they released their first film, Turn of the Tide, but struggled to distribute it, ultimately leading to the film being a bomb at the box office. Frustrated, Rank said, "Never again," and decided to basically buy his way into anything he needed to be successful with wholesome British cinema. He would need to create a media conglomerate. First, he folded General Film Distributors into his company in 1936. In the 1950s, the company would become J. Arthur Rank Film Distributors, and then just Rank Film Distributors. When you see the shirtless guy banging a gong at the beginning of a film, that meant it was a J. Arthur Rank joint. Rank continued to fall into good fortune when he made a deal with building tycoon Charles Boot to convert an old estate into a Hollywood-style movie studio, resulting in the famous Pinewood Studios. And hey, let's just straight up buy our own chain of movie theaters. In a moment of serendipity for Knacks, Rank bought Odeon Cinemas in 1938. And here's where we get back to the idea of the Children's Saturday Matinee, as Rank was very keen on the tradition, and with control of so many theaters, he could control the event. In 1943, Rank created the Odeon Children's Club. It wasn't just a children's movie event, it was a full-fledged club that you had to pledge an oath to join. I promise to tell the truth, to help others, and to obey my parents. Good, hearty English values. But Rank never seemed to plug up all the holes in his bucket. We have this organized weekly children's movie event, but what are you going to show them? Sure, there are children's films that could be imported, but these didn't necessarily fit in with Rank's Methodist values, the whole reason he got into the business in the first place. If he was going to keep doing the Odeon's Children's Club, he'd need to make proper, wholesome children's films. In 1944, Rank opened the Children's Entertainment Film Division of his own company, or CEF, and appointed Mary Field, a former teacher and documentary filmmaker, as director of the division. She shared in Rank's desires for wholesome, moral children's films. This extended into detailed research. In 1949, Field conducted experiments to read children's responses to certain films and judge their likes and dislikes. This was great, but again, there's holes in the bucket. It was becoming harder and harder to fund CEF. Rank was fresh out of Rich Widows, and so Rank was forced to shut down CEF in 1950. It wouldn't be a long shutdown, however, as the idea of creating positive children's entertainment was gaining traction among government programs, and in 1951, numerous organizations of the film industry teamed up and launched a revised version called the Children's Film Foundation, or CFF.
As an individual and as president of the British Film Producers Association, I welcome this decision to set up a joint advisory committee, and I will do everything in my power to make the proceedings of value to both associations and to the cinema public throughout the world.
This was to be a non-profit organization largely funded by the Eddy Levy, a tax on box office receipts. Mary Field returned as executive officer, and the CFF got started creating wholesome, 60-minute films for the Saturday matinee programs.
500,000 of them. Where are they all going? Well, we said it's Saturday, and here they are at the Children's Saturday Matinee. 500,000 of them come along every week. Once inside, this is what they see. The trademark of the Children's Film Foundation, and the finest children's films made anywhere in the world. Mary's guest of honor is an invisible rabbit, Mr. Horatio Nibbles.
Delicious.
Mummy chopped it up. She's talking to an invisible rabbit.
Between 1952 and 1979, the CFF produced and released over 130 of these 60-minute films, and it's these films that Nickelodeon would end up licensing in 1980. I don't know if they had access to the full catalog or just a sample of it. No official episode list of the show exists, but through TV listings in various newspapers, here's some of the CFF films we know for sure first row features aired. Adventures in the Hop Fields, 1954. Little Jenny accidentally breaks her mother's china dog, and desperate to make enough money to fix it, she tries to tag along with her friend's family, who are off to go hop picking in the countryside. There's good money in hop picking. The Kid from Canada, 1958. A Canadian country boy gets an invitation to visit his cousins in Scotland. He doesn't want to go at first, but quickly learns that there's not much difference between him and them. Bungalow Boys, 1961. The younger brother of a Sydney Beach lifeguard aspires to be just like his big bro. Cup Fever, 1965. A group of misfit kids challenge a youth soccer club to a match for the right to play in the park. The Christmas Tree, 1966. 3 kids go on an adventure to get a proper Christmas tree for the local hospital. All at Sea, 1969. A school cruise in Portugal turns into a mystery when a kid receives an odd package. Anoop and the Elephant, 1972. A vacationing child befriends a baby elephant from a nearby circus. I can't speak for how representative a sample this is for the entire CFF library, but from what I've managed to watch, these are all charming, fun little films. They all rely on child actors, so you shouldn't come in expecting the best performances, but I didn't come across any performances that were annoyingly bad, and otherwise the directing and editing is functional and competent. These adventures don't have high stakes in the usual sense, but they do all have high emotional stakes for the child characters involved, and I think that translates into empathetic filmmaking that a child audience would be able to engage with. And it's genuinely fun. It's not exactly a day at Chuck E. Cheese, but it's a hell of a lot more fun than the stuffy, bleak costume genres of children's classics. And I think it works so well for the station because Nickelodeon and the Children's Film Foundation feel like very close cousins. Both are organizations clumsily created by media conglomerates. Both were built to fill a hole in the market for children's media. Both aimed to create a media space for children where kids can feel at home and parents can take a few hours off. Both used existing research and child engagement of media, and both were run by an arguably out-of-touch businessman before being taken over by a former teacher. They're like alternate universe versions of each other. It's crazy. First Row Features was before my time, but I imagine I would have really been into it if I was around to see it. The CFF continued to make films up until 1985. That's when they ended the Eddie levy, and besides, a lot of the Saturday matinee audience was moving from movie theaters to television. CFF revised itself into CFTF, the Children's Film and Television Foundation, as a funding developer, but closed that down in the early 21st century. The CFF archive now belongs to the Children's Media Foundation, and several Region 2 DVDs have been released, 3 films on each. Not a comprehensive collection, but it's the largest home media presence of any of the content we've covered on Knacks thus far. You can really tell when real thought goes into children's media. You can feel it. And I think the comparisons between children's classics and front row features is a very good one. The former is what a bunch of out-of-touch adults think is good for kids. The latter is what a bunch of passionate people worked out was good for kids. Nickelodeon wasn't making the effort that CFF made, not yet, but hopefully through working with them, they would pick up some good habits.
Nick, 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 Nickelodeon. Nick, 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 Nickelodeon.
Next time, we explore the wonders of modern technology by not actually showing you the technology, but instead offering cartoon pictures of the technology while giant heads tell you why the technology is cool. Today's shout out goes to the Children's Media Foundation website. They have a complete listing of all the Children's Film Foundation films, along with a lot of pictures and sample clips. If you're interested in the CFF, this is the place to start. If you've been enjoying Knacks thus far, might I suggest hitting that like button? It doesn't just give me a morale boost, but also makes the videos easier to find in YouTube searches. If you want to know when new videos come in, consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications. And share the video with anyone you think might be interested in Nickelodeon or general media history. And if you really like this show, perhaps consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 goes a long way in helping the Pop Arena become secure and expand into other areas. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.